Here we go. Well, thanks for joining me once again at Pastor's Positive Mental Health Institute, here with another wonderful guest with a fantastic looking beard. I'm so glad to have him with us. Before we get started, if you like what you hear and you want to share it with people, please do that. Please like, subscribe, and share. And also, you can find out more information in the comments below. Has my contact information along with the website that you can go check out all the wonderful things that you have access to, and which you have access to me. Isn't that great? Anyway, so before we get more about me, we'll talk about who our guest is. So Pastor James Endrihs from Christ the King Lutheran Church, Enterprise, Alabama. So welcome. Glad you're with us.
Place to be.
And I would just like to ask you a couple questions before we get into, a little bit about your church, but I want to know what led you into the ministry.
What led me into the ministry? That's an interesting question for the whole LCMS and perhaps any other denomination. But what led me personally, I haven't had to answer that question in quite some time. But, looking back, I had a standard answer. But then looking back, we moved. I was in New Jersey. 11 years old, moved to Arkansas. And one of the few kids at an LCMS congregation. So I got a lot of encouragement from the members there back in the day to, just in the faith in general, keep the faith, keep moving in the faith, attend Bible study. Even a couple of them probably through the years asked me if I wanted to be a pastor. I was like, no way. So anyway, long story shorter, I was in the middle of an accounting degree, and I still think it's a worthy endeavor to get an accounting degree, even though AI may replace that one day. Back then, it was great. I didn't like accounting, though, but I just thought it was a good degree, and I thought maybe I'd go to, corporate law or something other than accounting, but I thought it was a good degree. And halfway in the middle of it, I realized that this is definitely not what I wanted to do, but I didn't really want to start over. And then eventually, as time went on, I wanted to do something with people. Wasn't too clear about that either. Graduated, sat down with my pastor. What do you think? And he says, have you ever thought of seminary? And I was like, well, And he said, well, you know what? How about I get an application? And you can fill it out and you can decide whether you want to go or not. And anyway, it's late in the year, so you probably wouldn't have to start till, so this is graduate in May, talked to pastor in June. Wouldn't have to start probably till next January. So I thought I had lots of time. And long story short, I got accepted and said, report in 2 weeks. So it's kind of a whirlwind tour. Yeah. And of course, everyone's excited. You kind of get ushered in. And I went to seminary to find out if I wanted to be a minister. And I kind of had, I guess I had a lower, that's not the right word, but I said, I don't know if I want to do this, this ministry. And then after a few years into the seminary, I was like, I can't believe God wants me to do this. So I think God's hand was at work through all that time, doing what needed to be done to guide me, lead me, direct me into the path. And it's been a blessing. So I can't remember when it was exactly, but I think fourth year, third year, probably the third year in, third year in. Someone asked me why I was in seminary, and I said, because I want to be a pastor. And then I realized that was the first time I'd ever said it.
Interesting. Yeah.
So, and when you get there, there's all kinds of guys that I wanted to be a pastor since I was in third grade, and I wanted to be a pastor. Like, who are you? What kind of kid were you?
Right. Yeah, no, it's interesting. One of the things that we're discovering and that I'm researching is how important church members and leaders in the church are to forming and encouraging future pastors. We find that when I was talking to Dr. Chris Adams from Biola, one of the things that he is discovering in his flourishing in ministry department, and well, I guess he has a whole ministry called Flourishing Ministry. It's a coaching thing, but anyway, he's doing this whole study, and the pastors who seem to flourish or have a better sustaining power in their ministry have grown up in the church and had people in the church kind of say, hey, have you thought about this? Whereas those who come late to faith in life and then say, oh, hey, I want to be a pastor, tend to have a little bit of a harder time. And some of that is, I think, is that we understand church. We've been around it. So, we're used to it. Maybe we're not surprised by some things that happen in church, although I'm still surprised from time to time of things that happen in the church. You can't write it.
Really? You're surprised at things. Hey, can I add something to that story?
Please.
I just remembered, I think it was sometime first semester. I don't know anybody. And it's just really interesting how God worked everything together, but there's more to it. But nonetheless, Professor Knipple, I can't remember his first name, but Knipple, he said, hey, about this time, some of you are thinking of quitting. This is the first semester and a couple months in. And he said, if anyone's like that, come and talk to me. So right after class, I said, hey, that's me. And, I was using all kinds of thinking of the potential debt, which really wasn't a legitimate reason for me at the time because there wouldn't have been that much debt. But nonetheless, he helped me to reframe it. He says, I can't tell you what to do. I can't tell you to stay. He says, but if you live to your 80, what's 3 months? If you think you have to be here, you'll be miserable. Why don't you choose to stay? Give it 3 months. What's 3 months when you live to your 80? And you'll see what happens. So in his office that day, and we prayed, I believe, I chose to stay. And it went from being like, I don't want to be here to tolerable. And of course, later on, it was enjoyable. But it was that professor helping me reframe, because I was thinking, the parents, the church, the son of the congregation, you gotta. And so I thought that was really good advice.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad they offer that. I'm glad they're honest and say, hey, some of you want to quit. Let's talk before you just do it. And that he's probably approachable. That always helps too.
Oh, yeah.
So next couple questions are kind of together, but I want to know a little bit about your church, or a lot, depending on what you want to share. Your role in the church, how long you've been there, because I think you've been there a little while, a few years anyway, at least, right? And then just kind of tell me about your church. So
I've been there 27 years. And anyway, well, this is a funny story. I don't say this to knock my congregation, especially since it's going to be online. But 27 years ago, when I came, I showed up with the U-Haul and the car, and I was supposed to meet everybody at the apartment to unload. Only one guy showed up, a very wonderful, turned out to be a great friend, an elder, a wonderful man named Larry Herbst. But Larry shows up. He's in his late 60s and he's got a bad hip, and he can only help for an hour, and and I'm 15 minutes late, but he was the only one that showed up, and it's to welcome the new pastor. So, and I don't know what's going on, so I figure, okay, whatever. And I unloaded about as much as I possibly could, and left the rest in the car. And it's hot, it's Alabama, sweating. I clean up. I go to a local Chinese restaurant to eat. And the fortune cookie says, it's not too late to change your path. I said, well, I got the U-Haul for like 3 more days and it's half full. But anyway, I thought that the people were very apologetic the next day, and helped me unload. And a soldier, actually a really strong, able-bodied, good guy soldier, saw it through to the very end and made sure everything was done. So good for him. Yeah. Anyway, what's my role in this 27 years? Well, you hear and you're told, and it's true, that you're there to preach the word and teach and administer the sacraments. The advice that I got from the district president, after call day and you meet the district president, he told me to go and love them. That was his advice. Just go and love them, Jim. That's what you need to do. Go and love them. And I was like, okay, whatever. I don't, obviously that's lived out in different ways, different people. But so preach the word, administer the sacraments. But I think through the years, I've really tried to challenge folks to, that phrase, to spur one another on in love and good deeds. And I think some people have been very receptive to that, and they want to. And then some people have bristled at that and told me so. And anyway, time goes on, you kind of reevaluate. But my role altered after 8 years. I met my wife, Cherie, at DCE, at a huge church, like 1,900 people up in Wisconsin, and took her away from Lutheran to come to Alabama. And she's very competent, very capable, very just a wonderful lady that everybody loves. And anyway, I used to, or maybe I shouldn't say this part, but I'm going to say it anyway. I used to joke with folks. They said, every now and then a call will come through and we're praying for your pastor. And I remember walking up to this senior lady, a friend of the family here, and I said, I think that if I ever took a call, people would be understanding. They'd go, okay, pastor's been here, whatever, 15, 20 years. Okay. But I said, but they'll weep for Cherie. And she looked at me and she went, yeah.
Didn't disagree.
Oh, that's okay. Everyone loves Cherie.
Yeah.
So our church, go ahead.
No, that's it. I was saying that's great. That's good. Your church, go ahead.
Our church is a Lutheran outpost in Alabama. So in our circuit's probably about 100 miles wide, and we have 6 churches. So there's not too many of us in this little, we are a military community. It's Army Aviation, Fort Novacell. And so they come here to learn to fly. So most of the soldiers, now there's other complementary, there's all kinds of people that take to run a base, but the students, they're mostly in their 20s, young people, young families, and they don't deploy from here. They go elsewhere and they'll deploy. So there's no family, not none, but very few families left behind. So we don't have that aspect of the ministry. We have a student for about a year. They learn to fly, and whatever course they're on, they'll rotate back every couple of years so we'll see them again. So anyway, we get a lot of young gung-ho individuals, and at first I grew up with the TLH 5 and 15, and as time went on, I was like, okay, I'm ready for something new, something different. But these young folks, they like 5 and 15, or the Divine Service Study 3. Well, they like a lot of different things, I guess. But it's refreshing to see young liturgical families. That this idea that we've got to have I'm not knocking people that have contemporary worship, but a small congregation can't really pull it off very well often. And so, but we can do liturgical worship. I hope we do it rather well by the grace of God. And so it's good. So we have a steady flow of young men and women and their families coming and go, and it's encouraging. And then in addition to that, there are a lot of retired military, because we have the base, and there's the all the things that go with the base, the PX and commissary and all that. So we have probably most people that come to church are either military, retired military, or civil service, or some combination. There are very few locals that grew up in Enterprise. But they're a good bunch. And I think a lot of our churches in town, I mean, some of the old traditional the 100-year-old Baptist church, they probably have families that have been there for 100 years, but we're an eclectic mix of different people, but mostly have that military flavor, I guess, or scent, whatever the right word is.
Scent. Well, I don't know. I'm sure there's a scent.
Yeah, bleep that out. The military accent. How about that? That sounds bad. But we have the aroma of Christ, right? There's an aroma to the Christian. To some were the smell of life and peace, and the others were the smell of death. So, military has its own scent, so to speak, as well.
Put a good Christian spin on it. So there you go. Over the years, 27 years or so, thank you for your service for 27 years. It's fairly rare in our denomination specifically, but in others too, for a pastor to be in one place that long. And so I think I commend you for that, because that creates a different type of dynamic in your congregation than those who say every 3 or 4 to 5 years have a different pastor in it, as you've seen in other areas. But how have you then over the years relied on church members?
Oh, well, the different people, different stages of your life. When I was a single pastor, again, I was single here for about 8 years. I had a number of families invite me in. And you're like 27, I guess, back then. So you're half the people's grandson, give or take, or it depends on if they're younger, you're their son.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lady who used to refer to me as her redheaded stepchild. And she still comes, and she's still a good friend. And so a lot of dinners at the house, lunches, a lot of time spent with the folks. And that gentleman, Larry, what he and his wife, I think, modeled. I mean, a lot of people are godly people, but that was my first introduction to just this godly people. He was generous with folks. He'd hire people to his house to pay them, but not just give them money, but make them or allow them to work to earn it, and that takes your own time and effort and energy, and there could be some potential scary moments involved and things like that, and he would just do it, and bad hip and all, and that guy who came to Bible study all the time would talk to me about maturing in the Christian faith, that he himself still needed to mature. And anyway, that was a big encouragement. So the folks invited me in. I had a gentleman, an old West Virginian. The beard looked like Uncle Jesse, and he could fix anything. He showed me plumbing, so I did some plumbing on the house, and had another gentleman show me some a little bit of with wiring. So I put in a few ceiling fans, and he would supervise me to make sure I did it right. And I had another gentleman. He and I and my wife rented a jackhammer and dug a hole in the basement to put in a sump pump. And then that was a treat, and he brought his tractor over to dig a hole. Well, to run a line, you have to dig the other 6 inches or whatever to bury the pipe. So just through the years, just a lot of inviting you over, encouraging stuff. I think my first or second, I give people a hard time, but just in a loving way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was my first or second birthday there, this one family that really just was very kind to me and adopted me. It was at Bible study, and they had this nice cake, and it was for the Bible study, and cut it up, and it's not slicing. Well, basically they had taken a car sponge and covered with icing to, so I just thought that was very nice to be, that they felt comfortable with kind of zapping me a little bit.
Yeah, they saw your love language, and so they
there you go.
Back to you.
And then you have the people praying for you, and there's certainly people being generous, either directly to me or to the church to help support the ministry. There's one wonderful woman in our congregation. She writes notes. That's her thing, and she helps out with other things too, but that's her big thing. And she writes like very encouraging personal letters. And it's not just me, because I've had other people. Can you believe what so-and-so wrote me? This is, very moving, very powerful, just wonderful letters. And that's been helpful through the years. So, so there's the physical help and the social help and the spiritual help. And again, praying for me, that certainly is
it's hard to have a church without people, so that's good. But
Yeah.
But it's nice when the people love you back, right? And love you well. And so, can you think about a specific time, maybe in 27 years, you might have had some moments where you felt a little bit down, maybe, or things weren't great, and how a church member or somebody felt you build, helped you build, be built up in ministry?
Oh, there's a bunch of those. But I thought about one earlier, but I'm going to tell you about one. This gentleman, um, I won't name names, so maybe I shouldn't say it at all. But anyway, it's a good story. Nonetheless, this person was unhappy with me, and my impression was that he was letting everyone else know he was unhappy with me. And I people would come to me and say, "Hey, so and so is trying to get you kicked out of the church," and that's annoying. And I remember asking this young man that went through new member class with the same guy, a young retired soldier. So he probably was 38, 39, just retired. He was on terminal leave. And he goes, "Oh, yeah, I've been meaning to talk to you about that, Pastor." He goes, "My advice is just let it go." He goes, "I used to be just like that. Let it go." That was his advice. Well, little did I know, within a month, that gentleman died. Within a month and a half, maybe, he died of leukemia.
I know.
No one knew he had it. I'm sorry, audience, I just threw that on you so hard like that. But and I was able to share this very encouraging, those 2 or 3 sentences, very encouraging story with his wife at the funeral. I preached at the funeral, even though they were already in Huntsville, so that's about 4 or 5 hours away from here. They wanted me to do the funeral, and just kind of came out of nowhere. And he was just assuming that his different symptoms were, old age at 39 or 40. And anyway, just a loving family, very encouraging, very sharp man. That family also encouraged me. They said, long before he passed, when he was still a member, and they said, this is the first church he's ever joined. And they attributed to somehow I clicked with him, but glory be to God. But the fast forward over a decade, fast forward, the gentleman that was very unhappy with me, that the soldier said, "Hey, I used to be just like that. My advice is just let it go." That gentleman I didn't even recognize came up to me in a parking lot at a grocery store and said, "Hey, I'm so and so," and I didn't even recognize him. And he said, "I did you wrong. I did you wrong." He goes, "I was in a bad place, and I did you wrong." And I was just floored. So, talk about encouraging. So the encouragement of the soldier saying, "Hey, I used to be like that. I'm not anymore." And then 13 years later, or whatever, how many years later, the actual person saying kind of roughly the same thing. "I was in a bad place. I'm not there now. And I did you wrong." And we didn't. We went our separate ways, but I was just I was encouraged. I thought it was just a wonderful moment. And then there's certainly been other ones that are not as dramatic as that. I used to have a little.
We like
Go
dramatic.
ahead.
No, dramatic's good.
Well, that was one of the bigger ones, right?
For sure. Yeah. Well, and I think that's a great word to pastors. If you're listening to this, is that, don't, the problem with pastors, and since you and I are one, I think I can speak fairly authoritative on this, is that we want everyone to like us, and we want to do our jobs well, and we want people to be able to receive from us, and we feel this great sacred calling. And so when someone's not getting along, for whatever reason, we immediately take it extremely personally. And so when the soldier tells you just kind of let it go, well, easier said than done, but it is good advice. But I think that the thing for us to remember is it's not always, and I tell this to people, I give this advice to people, I need to take it myself, but often I say, it's not always about you. Or I'll say, one lady, I said, "Good thing now everything's about you." And the thing is that's good advice for us. This gentleman, as he's confessed to you a little more than a decade later, said, Hey, it really wasn't you. It was really where I was at, and you just happened to be an easy target for me to take it out on. And so, we need to remember that's good perspective to know. And obviously, we know as pastors, there's a real enemy who wants to disrupt our ministry and wants to cause
Yes.
division and dissension in the church. And so, there is that at play also, that sometimes we tend to downplay a little bit at times because we don't want to make too much of it, right? It's not everything's this big spiritual battle, but at the same time, it's still real, and we don't want to. So anyway, but you stayed, and God turned it around and encouraged you, and I'm glad that there was that meeting in the parking lot. What a great story. So over the years, then, and again, you must have started when you were like 12 because you're 27.
Ah, I
What
was a
have you?
savant. I read the Triglotta when I was 3.
Yeah, exactly. What have you found though to be the most challenging aspect of ministry?
Oh, I definitely people, and not just dealing with me, but sometimes their own. We're all sinners, and as much as people are a blessing and an encouragement and a joy to be around, sometimes they're cantankerous and grumpy and angry and unforgiving, and all those kind of things. Um, but that's life. That's every family has that. As far as a day-to-day kind of a benevolence, I think benevolence is a big challenge. And I've asked lots of pastors what they do, and I don't think anyone has a great. Basically, they have a plan that fits their gifts, talents, and abilities. That's what it is. But no one has a solution. And what I mean by but what I mean by benevolence is that people that are often more broken than anyone you have in your church, um, have burned multiple bridges, if not every single bridge they have, who may be wrestling with addiction and just chronic, all kinds of problems. They'll come and they'll talk to you. And if you're a welcoming ear, you'll get more conversations. And anyway, you want to help people. And our local Catholic priest, I remember him once, heard it through the grapevine how he dealt with this individual. And his whole point was to push people to seek God. And I thought that was very simple because we have a benevolent fund and we have a food pantry, and we can help people to all these practical things, and not that God wasn't a part of it, but I've really tried to, ever since I listened to that, I go, oh, I should really encourage people to look to God. It's like a revelation. We still have a food pantry and a benevolence fund and all those kind of things, and I find the most evangelism, the most prayer, the most, in a sense, outreach. Because everyone that calls, I say, hey, I'm a pastor here. Do you mind if I pray for you and pray with you about anything? And during the week, generally, that is the most outreach, constant benevolent, I shouldn't say constant, but frequent benevolent requests. And so it's a challenge, especially when you see that if people could just get along with their family, they would maybe financially stable, or if they could just stop doing the bad thing they keep doing, that they could. And talented people, capable people, intelligent people that are just gripped with addiction and drugs, and yeah, it's a challenge. And it's not the hardest thing ever. That I certainly there are harder things in life, but as a regular thing to deal with, it is a challenge for me.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. When I was serving at a large church in New Mexico, um, benevolence isn't really one of my gifts. I struggle with it, and so we had a lot of we gave out a lot of food boxes, and the pastor that oversaw that was always gone on Thursdays. And so there were a bunch of frequent shoppers that would always wait till Thursday because one of us other staff members would have to deal with it. And they had to fill out an application, all these things, because we were the biggest food pantry in the community. And so Friday, the pastor that oversaw it would look at the applications, their information from all the people who got food, and he goes, "Why did you give them one?" I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, and I realized, I don't have that. Yeah, and so I always pray for empathy because I'm not very empathetic, and so it's amazing that the Lord still uses me, and because it's just one of those things that. So you have challenges with people, and I would say even that benevolence aspect is you want to help them appropriately, right? And sometimes you just feel there's a couple things that I wrestle with, and I just really truly can't help them. I can't. I can't. And again, we want to just pray, and magically they get clean, and they are ready to go find a job that afternoon, and they're ready to. And that
Yeah.
doesn't happen. That can be very challenging for us. But as we deal with these people over the years, as you've dealt with them, as God has put us in the family of God, and we're here to help one another, and we're part of this body called the church, and our jobs to equip people to do the work of the ministry and to help them, as you said it earlier on, that sometimes as you encourage them to actually live out their faith, you didn't say it that way, but some people embrace that, some people go, I don't like that. And it's one of those things that we find challenging. So as you've dealt with various people in various stages of their journey with Christ, how have you had other church members kind of help you face some of those challenges with other people?
Oh, well, let me, can I give a couple? But
Absolutely.
speaking of benevolence, it's good to have a good story. I mean, a positive outcome. I mean, there are I have a lot of people that thank me for the prayers, and they'll call me back, months later and say, "Can we have more help?" And I remember you always pray. Thank you.
Mm.
But we had a gentleman who, and you never know anyone's story. You'd like to, you'd like to believe I don't know,
Yeah.
you just don't know. So anyway, this guy shows up, and he's older, probably my age, and he's got a cane, and he's a little heavy set. He doesn't get around well, and I can't remember all the details, but we moved him he was living in a terrible place. It just was a complete, I can't even describe it. It was just a mess, just a terrible mess. So we move him because he has some gentleman that's willing to let him stay in one of the trailers in an abandoned trailer park. And so he's moving into a trailer with no running water. That's the improvement we're going. And so this guy, there's a pump, I guess 100 feet, 150 feet from the trailer. And I visited him in his trailer, and he's got dozens of gallon jugs all over the house, full of water. So some are to flush, some are to wash, some are to cook. And this guy always came to church just clean cut. And that was a shocker too. I mean, what a good guy. And eventually our church, and I wasn't able to make it that day, they ran a PVC line from the water source. Eventually, this took, months later. He was coming to church and very faithful, very, very, very nice gentleman. And anyway, they ran a PVC line to his trailer, his mobile home, I guess. And so then he had water. And he continued to come and was very thankful. And eventually, his ship came in, and he decided to pack up and leave because he had enough money to get a vehicle and get the house or whatever. I don't know, whatever it was he was looking for. And I remember some people saying, "Oh, hey, we helped this poor guy," and then he left. And I always looked at that he was very thankful, very encouraging, and that we were blessed to be able to help him. And he wrote a very thankful, "Thank you for helping me get on my feet." And that's, so we were just basically port in the storm, and then now he's able to sail on. And I always thought that was a very encouraging story with that gentleman. As far as how people help me with benevolence like that, I'm not the only one that does it. I have a gentleman that writes that. I usually deal with the folks or talk to the folks, and he does all the running around, pays the bills. And he got remarried, and he and his wife are now a tag team on that. And oh man, it's just great. I go on vacation, I come back, and hey, we handled everything. There's no note. The answer machine's not full of messages, and it's just, oh, that's so awesome. Thank you. And one other lady, little old lady from Lithuania, talk about God working powerfully in someone's life. She basically, they never had kids, and family was in Germany, and his family, he was a sharecropper, I think a foster kid. I'm not really clear. They were scattered, so it was just those two. He winds up having a stroke and heart issues, and so she's doing everything for him. He can walk with assistance, and he can say yes and no. And anyway, we kind of try to do a little bit of catechetical work, talking about the real presence, that's kind of interesting. And that all worked out. And so this lady was just in her shell, and she'd be willing to talk to people that she knew, basically. So when he passed, there wasn't anyone to lean on. I mean, there was no kids, the family's gone, her husband's gone, her whole day was taking care of him. Now what? And I remember reading somewhere that people work through grief through service. And so I invited her on a number of my nursing home visits. And long story short, the people we went to visit, we'd see other people in the room, and other people got to know little Miss Esther. And Miss Esther was the hit. Everyone just loved little Miss Esther. And so that now I had to bring Miss Esther right to everywhere because everyone wanted to see her. She wasn't afraid to touch people. She fix their hair and their oxygen and put a cross on their forehead and fix their pillow, and she would touch people, and they really, really enjoyed Miss Esther. And anyway, she went from being in a shell, not able to hardly do anything with other people, to just, hey, Miss Esther, we need people. Can you call through the directory? And so she'll make 30 calls, and just go talk to people. Hey, there's a potluck. And she's now since been sainted, but she was very encouraging with benevolence. And, I get a call at midnight. Hey, I'm in the emergency room. This is not a member, but I'm in the emergency room, and my boyfriend just beat me up. I need a ride. It's like 11 o'clock at night. So, hey, Miss Esther, can you meet me? We'll go give this lady a ride. Sure thing, Pastor. Let's go.
Well, it's tough to replace people like that. Hopefully someone was watching her and said, hey, now that she's gone, I want to pick up some of the slack. Sounds like you need a handful of people to pick up the slack that she was doing. But
yeah, and there's a lot of good folks doing a lot of good things.
Yeah.
Those stand out.
Yeah, for sure.
She was there in the beginning.
Yeah, she's watched you grow up.
she was as old as my mother. My mother, Mrs. Herbst, the organist, they were all the same age, and so every time the year rolled around, they all had the same birthday.
Fun.
Anyway, just stands out over time.
No, it's interesting. You mentioned the gentleman that they ran a PVC pipe to, and kind of the reaction of some of the church members. Hey, we did this for him, and now he leaves. It's kind of like we raise children so that they'll actually leave, right? It's the kind of same idea sometimes.
I wish I would have thought of that. That's good.
Next time. No. Anyway, so looking over the last couple weeks, how has a church member made you smile?
Oh, well, I know you're familiar with the Lutheran Women in Mission, the Lutheran Women Missionary League. We just had our district convention. My wife is the district president, actually. And so I knew there's a lot of work that goes into those things, but when you're married to the DP, you can see how much, there's a lot of work. And it was in our zone.
Okay.
So for those of you, the district is split up in zones, little groups of churches that will host the convention, and those churches are more responsible for making sure it occurs, and all the things, from setting up communion to making sure you got speakers and banquets, and it's everything. Just everything goes into one. Anyway, our congregation was also, our ladies, our LWM ladies, with Women in Mission ladies, were a part of that, and they did a skit this last Saturday night to invite the ladies to the national convention coming up in Nebraska next year. And anyway, they did such a wonderful job, and they hammed it up, and and everyone was laughing. It's just really good to see the camaraderie, the fellowship, and they were hardworking ladies too. They did do a lot of work too, and it was just good to see that. And it literally made me smile, not just because of the skit, but it was just a blessing to see.
Yeah, and it's kind of I mean, it's just this bad analogy, but it's almost like you're a proud father, go, man, look at these are my people. Look at what they're doing. Anyway, our coach, maybe we'll call coach. That might be better. I don't
There
know.
you go, life coach.
So if you were to, sum it all up in a one or two sentences, what is the desire for you, for your people at your church?
Oh, the desire for me, for my people, I want to see them just prosper in God's grace. We're all gifted, different talents, abilities, aptitudes, everything, and everyone, like that little old lady, Miss Esther, little senior lady. Now that I'm closer to her age, her thing was to give people a hug, and she was super strong for her age because she had to take care of her husband.
Hmm.
Plus, she grew up in Europe during the war, and anyway, she just had this strong grip. Anyway, sometimes she'd hurt some people when she hugged them too hard. But all she would do is hug them and give them a piece of Werther's Original. And everyone loved Miss Esther. Everyone loved Miss Esther. My mom used to send greeting cards to everybody. That's what her thing was. So there's different, and I mentioned maybe that's why that one lady that sends the encouraging word hit me so strongly, because it reminded me of my own parental role. My dad was the head usher, but he also would clean up the kitchen every week, like every week, clean up after coffee. I used to joke that he did it during Bible study, so he wouldn't have to go to Bible study. He never really did answer that, but nonetheless, he did it for years. This is a dude.
Yeah.
So, just how living out the faith, that's really to prosper in God's grace too. Because, back in the day, I used to think, and I don't think this anymore, so don't get upset, but I used to ask the question, would the cause of Christ be lost if Christ the King Lutheran Church disappeared? And of course, the answer is no, but it really hit me very strongly that was the wrong question. You don't even ask that question. The people of God, the people in this community need, kind of like George Bailey and the Bailey Brother Building and Loan, they need this one institution to help the people. This institution where where grace is administered, and word and sacrament, and certainly all of God's word is. Hopefully, the whole counsel of God is proclaimed eventually, but nonetheless, this town needs it, and our people need it, and so I want people to prosper in God's grace, and to live out the faith and in that grace.
No, that's great. You kind of reminded me of what's the Luther quote that says, God doesn't need your good works, but your neighbor does.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and that's part of living out that faith, prospering in the grace of God, and that grace. When you realize that grace, it motivates you, and you want to extend it to other people. Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining me. Just always a pleasure to talk with you. I find you extremely engaging, and when we were at the conference last October, just the joy that you share and bring to others is infectious. And so thank you for that. And I just, again, appreciate the work that you do. And I pray that you continue to do it, as I know that you will, as the Lord sees fit. With his help, we continue to carry on. So again, if you like this, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. Also, if you don't mind, James, I'll put the website for your church in the comment section also. Is that all right with you?
Oh, sure. It's
great.
Yes, that'd be great.
Yes.
And I was blessed to meet you. I think it was a divine meeting. I think the Lord brought us together, and obviously there's more to that story. Kirk eventually became one of the presenters at our our professional church workers conference, and so it's been a blessing.
Yeah, I'd never been to Louisiana before, so
survived.
It was great. No, so yeah, and so anyway, as we continue to labor for the Lord, I always want to encourage everyone that we would work together to grow in the love of Christ and to build one another up in that love. All right, thanks again, Jim.
All right, God's blessings. Thank you.
You too.